Do you understand Spanish but can't speak it fluently? This is actually a very rare thing, and there aren't many people who have this sort of trait or are in this position where they can understand the language, pretty well, where they're able to understand what people are saying, but they just can't seem to communicate in the sense that they can't seem to speak. And that is impeding their progress when it comes to speaking fluently. If you don't know me, my name is Hamid. I'm 16 years old, and I became a polyglot at 13 years old after getting fluent in Spanish after the summer of 2022. So here's my before and after. Here's before the summer.
Hola, estoy comiendo comida. Voy a mejorar mi español. Y ahora puedo hablar de más o menos muchas cosas, pero hay un límite.
El meme es un pescado debajo del agua.
Sí.
Y hay un video, ¿sí lo has visto?
No lo he visto, pero explícame.
Ok, es un pescado debajo del agua.
Sí, sí.
Y el pescado mira la cámara y en vez de decir glup, 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 mama huevo.
Oh, sí. Bueno, chicos. Me voy a recomendar algunas películas o series para practicar mi español. So as you can see, I'm able to have conversations and conversation fluent. And now I'm going to speak in Spanish just to prove that. En este video te voy a ayudar a hablar en español si ya puedes entender a los hispanohablantes, pero no puedes hablar. O sea, no puedes hablar con fluidez. Entonces, para tener conversaciones, tienes que hablar. If you're watching this video, you're most likely, the goal that you had when you first started learning Spanish was most likely to be able to have conversations and connect with people, right? 99% of people, when they say, oh, I want to get fluent in Spanish, they're not actually talking about they want to get fluent in Spanish necessarily. And this is actually one of the first parts we're going to get into. So to help with this issue of being able to understand Spanish but not being able to speak it, if you're watching this video, your goal is to have conversations. And that means basically to be able to speak. And I'm going to go through exactly what that means so we can fix this issue of being able to understand the language but not necessarily being able to speak it. So I remember when I first thought of what fluency was. So I'd been watching tons of YouTube videos about the topic of what fluency was. You probably have also done this where, there's all these language YouTubers that talk about, okay, what is fluency? How can we define fluency? And eventually, after watching all these videos, I had come to the perfect definition. So from the YouTubers I'd seen, I recognized a simple definition of fluency. And this is basically the dictionary definition of fluency, which most people say basically. Fluency is having the trait of being fluent in speech. And so that kind of seems annoying. Being fluent in a language means having fluidity when you speak, having this flow in your words. Now, usually being fluent is defined as being able to speak effortlessly and articulately. So this is what some of the YouTubers would say. Most people, when they think fluent, that's what they think. They think effortlessly, articulately, and you have this flow. Even though the dictionary definition is just having the flow. But this isn't accurate in relation to what most people think fluency is. Because you are watching this video because you want to be able to connect with people and speak with them. And your problem is that you can't speak, as in you struggle with speaking, but you can understand natives, but you struggle getting the words out of your mouth, which is a very peculiar instance to be in. But it's actually a better one because speaking fast, it doesn't actually necessitate that you can have conversations and connect with people. The fact that you're even able to understand natives and that you're in this situation where you understand Spanish, but you can't necessarily speak it that well is a much better situation to be in than the opposite, than the inverse. And I can personally relate to this. So if you don't know, I was born in Sweden, but my whole family were from Azerbaijan, which is basically a country next to Turkey. And Azerbaijani, the language Azerbaijani, is a very, very similar language to Turkish. So even now, I'm in this situation where I can understand a very good amount of Turkish. I can understand a very decent amount of it, where I can understand what's going on. Some words are very similar, right? They would say nasılsın, I would say necasan. So I'm in this situation, not with Spanish, but with Turkish. And same thing with Swedish and Norwegian. So I grew up in Sweden. I was born and raised in Sweden. And so I speak Swedish, of course. But I can also understand a bit of Norwegian just because of how similar the languages are. And I can't speak any Norwegian. I have no idea what it sounds like, or I barely can speak it. I can't really speak any of it. But I can understand it just because of, understanding certain words and stuff. But you might be in the same situation with Spanish. And this is why most people that are in this situation are usually people who grew up learning Spanish, like their family speaks Spanish with them, but they don't actually speak Spanish themselves. They understand a bit of Spanish because their parents have been speaking Spanish with them, but they might not speak it like as well as they want to. Then this equation for fluency, this formula, is going to be very valuable for you, okay? So the best way to define fluency is to do it in two separate categories, and that's conversational fluency and native fluency. Conversational fluency is being able to have conversations where both parties understand each other to the point where they can have a full conversation. This is where the flow, the fluidity, is in the conversation and not necessarily only in your speech. A lot of people have this, like, you can always feel like this imposter syndrome where you're like, oh, am I really fluent? Can I say that I'm fluent? If you stutter all the time and if you can't really get this perfect flow of words out of your mouth. The thing is, that doesn't even exist in English. In these videos, like my editor can justify this, I stutter so much. I repeat my sentences millions of times, even though I'm still fluent in English. English is my best language. Speaking fluently and being fluent in the language isn't about the flow in your speech only. It's not about even speaking perfectly or perfectly articulatedly. It's not a word. But rather, the flow is in the conversation, that the conversation can happen. You right now, or if you clicked on this video, you're in the situation where you're obsessed with learning Spanish and you want to get to this point of conversational fluency, not necessarily having perfect Spanish, but then you're in this case where you understand Spanish, probably because your parents have been speaking it and you might have grown up in a Spanish-speaking country or something, but you can't really speak Spanish, where getting the words out of your mouth just doesn't really happen. It's key to understand that the flow is not supposed to be in your speech. It's supposed to be in the conversations. And this is crucial because it will eliminate this belief of like having to have perfect Spanish. There's no such thing as perfect Spanish because no one's perfect in any of their languages. So throw away this idea of, okay, I need to speak perfectly fluently. It's like, no, the goal is to have the conversations, and you might already be conversationally fluent if you can even understand natives. So if what you're struggling with is speaking, then this is going to be very well to understand. That native fluency is when we're indistinguishable from a native. And this is when your accent is on point and you can understand every bit of Spanish that you can hear. If you understand Spanish and you can't speak it, you're closer to native fluency than most people who have been studying Spanish for like years, okay? It's a very specific person that I'm making this video for. So understand that there's an effort discrepancy, that your goal is to reach conversational fluency. Conversational fluency took me around 120 hours of studying, spread across 5 to 6 months. Native fluency is something that I'm still working on. Understand that your goal in terms of speaking is not the native fluency level, it's just the conversational fluent level. And by the way, if 120 hours of studying spread across 5 to 6 months, and by the end of that, I was also trying to learn how to understand Spanish, which you already seem to have already progressed in, if you're clicking on this video. And so to understand fluency and to understand our goal, this is the fluency equation, which, by the way, this is just pure gold for you. So what this means in your case is that, firstly, fluency is speaking multiplied by understanding. That is it. Because firstly, we define fluency as conversational fluency and native fluency. In all of them, or both of them rather, are in relation to conversations. Or firstly, conversation fluency is in relation to conversations. Native fluency is more so every single part of the language, including writing letters, writing essays, being able to write a novel or a short story in the language, etc. That's things that we work on in school for years on end, which is why your native language, like I grew up in Sweden, so I know certain like reasoning words in Swedish. Likewise, the native would know certain complicated words in that native language. And that's what native fluency is. Remember, we know that our goal is conversational fluency. And so in a conversation, there's only two aspects that matter, speaking and understanding. You're watching this because you already have 50% of this down, which is huge. And so I want to tell you the story about my two Arabic friends. So they're natives. They speak the language fluently and they speak with a great accent, etc. But they can't write or read at all. They don't have any knowledge in how to write or read or write Arabic. But they're still completely fluent, natively fluent, in fact. And so being literate in the language doesn't actually matter that much. And this is the first step, because your goal is to get better at speaking if you clicked on this video, which means don't let this sort of propaganda of, okay, to get better at any language, you have to read the language and you have to start writing essays in the language. Like, no, that's not how it works. Your goal is to get better at speaking. So why would you do anything other than speaking? If you're trying to get better at stronger abs, would you do squats? Even if squats train your abs a little. Like squats, by definition, if you're doing standing squats, you need your core to stabilize, which means you're using your abs. But if the goal is to train your abs, you probably should train abs, right? So in this fluency equation, most people, they fall for this propaganda on YouTube where they see these people talk about, okay, so I did a vocabulary exercise where I memorized an Anki. And then I did a chart where I memorized every single verb in Spanish and all their conversations. And then I wrote 5 essays a day. It's like, you're wasting your time. Sure, if you do squats, your abs might get slightly stronger, but not stronger than the guy who had been training abs, right? Which is why all these people, they look at me, and when I say that I got fluent in a few months in 120 hours of studying, and they got fluent after 2,000 hours of studying, they look at me and say that I'm scamming them and I'm a liar. It's like, no, we both wanted to get stronger abs. I trained abs, you trained your legs. Of course my abs are going to be stronger than your abs because you did squats, I did crunches or bend or what are some ab exercises? You get my point, right? So you clicked on this video because you want to get better at speaking. You have to then be speaking. My Arabic friends are fluent in their languages, but they can't read or write. That should tell you a big thing about language and getting fluent. And so what the fluency equation looks like is what I call the LUR and SUR ladders. Simple question is, how do we improve the skills of speaking and understanding spoken Spanish? By speaking and understanding spoken Spanish. You already have the second part down of understanding spoken Spanish. And so all you need to do is just speak more Spanish. I mean, it sounds stupid, right? You clicked on this video wanting to get like this big key. The key to get better at speaking Spanish is to speak more Spanish. Now, I'm going to obviously break this down and actually give you something more valuable than that. But honestly, most people don't even realize that basic fact of the universe. And so to get better at speaking Spanish, you have to speak Spanish, then understand how to say something in Spanish, because most likely you won't be able to speak the first time. And then you repeat those 2 steps. And what I call this is the SUR ladder. So the LUR ladder is how you get better at listening or understanding spoken Spanish. And you already pretty much have done that. And so what this looks like to you is you're high up on the LUR ladder, but you're down here on the SUR ladder. That is what this, like the person watching this video right now, that's his situation or their situation. And so fluency is at the top of these 2 ladders. You've climbed like the first ladder, the LUR ladder. You're just missing the SUR ladder. And so the key part is, and the reason why you aren't fluent in Spanish yet, if you understand Spanish, the key part is that anytime anyone ever got fluent was through climbing both of these ladders. You cannot not do one of them and get fluent. This is just the basic fact of the universe. If you cannot speak and understand the language, and when I say understand, I'm talking about the spoken, audible language, right? You don't have to be able to understand written Spanish to be able to be fluent. You have to be able to understand spoken Spanish. There is not a single person who's ever gotten fluent without having those 2 skills. Yet, there are people who are fluent who can't read or write. My Arabic friends, for example. I could barely read or write in Azerbaijani when I was 8 years old. Yet, I was still fluent, right? So, same thing applies here. So the exercise we're going to use, and I'm going to teach you now, in order to get better at speaking Spanish and climb the SUR ladder, is called Narrate, Elaborate, Contemplate, okay? So to get better at speaking Spanish, we have to speak Spanish, understand how to say something in Spanish, and repeat those 2 steps. Now, there are a million ways of climbing the SUR ladder, which basically just means there are millions of ways to speak Spanish, understand how to say something in Spanish, and then repeat those 2 steps. You can do that in any way that you want. Genuinely. Most people just have to understand this. Most people's constraint in being able to speak Spanish fluently is that they don't speak enough Spanish. That's their main constraint. So just get through that first. Just start speaking Spanish. Okay? Now, the way I like to do this is through the framework that I call Narrate, Elaborate, Contemplate. Now, you don't necessarily have to follow this method. You can technically just talk about whatever you want and then, do the next step, which is to understand how to say something. So you can literally just speak Spanish however you want, and then you're not going to know how to say something, and then you're going to find out how to say it, and then you're going to go back. And that's what SUR is. SUR ladder stands for speak, understand, and repeat. So you're going to speak Spanish, then you're going to understand how to say something in Spanish, and you repeat those 2 steps. But the reason why this framework worked so well for me, and this is the framework I did during the summer of 2022 in my free time, is because this framework emulates a conversation better than any other sort of speaking framework exercise that I've done previously. First step in relation to speaking is to narrate. So to narrate is to tell a story, to report a recent event, or to commentate or give your opinion on something. Usually, a conversation starts with some sort of narration. Someone starts telling a story of something. Someone reports something like, oh, did you hear what happened yesterday? Blah, blah, blah. Or someone gives their opinion on something. Most conversations start like that. You can think about pretty much any conversation you've been in today even. Like, think about the last conversation you had today. It probably started with a narration of something. So the next step after that is to elaborate. Now, to elaborate is to give details. So give details on your story or your report. or your opinion or commentary. Most people will ask for opinions in a conversation. Most people will say, oh, well, could you tell me more about that? And then they ask for details. So imagine you told a story of like, oh, I tried becoming a barber one time, but then I gave up, right? People ask, okay, wait, how do you start becoming a barber? Like, what did you do to start becoming a barber? Then you have to give details. Well, I had to order it on Amazon. I had to do this. I had to find clients, etc. Right? And you see how this is now getting more words out of our mouth. You are now actively speaking more Spanish than you would have otherwise if you would have just only said it in a narration. And you can also see that every step that we go up, the higher level speaking it is. So narrating is very simple, right? Most people can narrate many things in the language. I can say in Chinese, 我喜欢冰淇淋. I like ice cream. I don't know how to explain why I like ice cream, and I can't give you details on what type of ice cream I like, but I can narrate it. So narration is like at level 1. Then elaborating is level 2, where you give more details, and that's how you develop a bigger vocabulary. Finally, it is to contemplate. Contemplate is to basically question something. So question your story, its authenticity, the characters, questioning your own opinions, the recent event. This is the highest level of speaking, in my opinion, because this is what you see most debaters and, you see these basically nerds online where they give the craziest sort of like they start contemplating their entire belief system. And you see they use these weird words or like complicated words like, oh, that is a very fallacious argument you have there. However, I would have to disagree due to these implications of this framework. It's like you hear these very complicated words being used that you don't hear like that often. And that's because contemplation and elaboration are just higher levels of speaking in languages. And so that's why I like using these frameworks, because most people in conversations are going to question your opinion, your story, your thing. They're going to ask why, right? Why'd you become a barber? What was the thing that led you to becoming a barber? Or what was the point of it all? Or why do you believe in this thing? Why don't you think this way, right? This is how most conversations are, and most complicated conversations. And so being able to practice them, like practice your speaking ability in these conversations, in these things that you're going to face beforehand, will help you so much more in conversations than you'll ever realize. Because I can't tell you the number of times I've done this exercise where I narrated how I got fluent in Spanish, and the amount of times people have asked me in real conversations how I got fluent in Spanish, I didn't even have to like sit there, well, because I had already practiced that exact same topic. Right? That's why I like speaking in this way, right? If you just did it the normal way, which is a SUR, right? Speak, understand, repeat, without using like the method that I'm teaching you right now, you probably wouldn't be able to predict the same topics that you'd happen to speak about during conversations, which is why I like using this method and why it's the method I'm teaching you right now. The next step is to understand. So ignore the title change. In order to understand those things that we don't know how to say, we're going to use DeepL, which is a translator app, and we're going to focus on word-for-word translations in order to fully understand each sentence. Okay, that is it. That is how to understand Spanish. And so in this way, you're going to get better at just being able to get the words out of your mouth. Now, I will say, if you don't have a good understanding of basically basic grammar and stuff, then this won't really work that well because you won't really understand the translations that you're getting. But if you're able to understand Spanish, you probably have a pretty good understanding of basic verb conjugation, the métese le lo comes before the changed verb. And the final step is to repeat. So we're going to go back to saying the thing that we now know how to say. So first, you didn't know how to say, for example, I don't like dogs, right? Because you're clicking on this video because you don't know Spanish or you don't know how to speak Spanish. So you tried speaking Spanish by narrating something and elaborating on something and then contemplating it. And when you were narrating, you didn't know how to say it. So then you went to DeepL, you translated that sentence. You did a word-for-word translation as well, so you understood every word into that sentence. And then finally, now that you know how to say no me gustan los perros, you know how to say I don't like dogs, you're going to go back and then you're going to say that. So no me gustan los perros. And so this time we should be a lot more fluent in saying it because we just learned how to say it, right? This is actually how I got fluent in Swedish, Azerbaijani, English, and also Spanish. Every language anyone has ever gone fluent in, it was with this like trial and error process of repeating those two steps. You cannot, like humans learn through repetitions. So quality matters over quantity, but quantity matters most. And so this right here is quality. Doing this exercise is quality, right? But if you don't do enough quantity, then none of the previous steps will matter. And so this exercise can be done 24/7 in the background when you're in your free time, which is why it is so high leverage, because it is just speaking. You are literally just speaking words. You can even try thinking about the words or even just like whispering it. I remember pacing around my house when I was first getting fluent in the summer of 2022. just like pacing around my house, whispering in Spanish and like emulating the, narrate, elaborate, contemplate, and just having your DeepL in my hand on my phone. And just every time I didn't know how to say something, I just translated it and then said it. You will 100%, I'm telling you, within the first 5 to 10 hours of doing this exercise, your speaking is going to become instantly better. Most people don't even start this exercise. Actually, most people haven't even reached this part in the video. So respect to you for even watching this far into the video. And so I hope this video helped you. You can see I have a bunch of other frameworks here. Today I just did a small chunk of the fluency equation, and I taught you my narrate, elaborate, contemplate method. There are a bunch more of these like methods and frameworks that I use to get fluent. And the slide you're looking at right now is the reason why I got fluent so much faster than everyone else, that I'm getting comments online that people are telling me that I'm lying about my fluency, which is such a weird thing. And then these people were like making the comments where they were like, oh, make a video speaking with natives. I bet you won't do it. Yeah, you won't do it because you're lying about being fluent. And then I did it, and then they retracted their statements. Like, the truth is that the truth doesn't mind being questioned. And you're going to find that if you do what I told you in this video, I'm telling you, you will see an improvement. This is just a basic fact of the universe. If you do the correct steps, you will see an improvement. So I just gave you the correct steps. So for the person that is watching this video and that understands Spanish but cannot speak Spanish, if you do exactly what I said in this video, you will reach fluency because you will finish the fluency equation. You already understand speaking Spanish. You already understand how to understand Spanish. So now you just have to climb the SUR ladder by speaking Spanish, and that will get you to fluency. Now, if you want help from me to actually implement these frameworks and finally start learning Spanish in a clear, structured way, then check the description for my premium paid product. I hope you enjoyed this video, and stay humble.